All right, guys. This lecture is uh, hopefully not going to be too long, but I'm afraid it probably will be because it's it has a lot to do with what's going on currently as I post this with the riots and so forth that's going on with George, the murder of George Floyd, and a bunch of mass protests and angry rioting and looting has been taking place as a result. This seems like it's bigger than what I remember during the Rodney King riots. But hopefully this lecture will kind of help you calm down at least and understand why angry blacks are pawns. Um, you know, I hate to say this because I'm black myself, what but basically, angry blacks are just retarded, and that's because, like anyone who's angry for an extended period of time, they become retarded to the point where they can be easily manipulated and used by other people, especially white people, white liberals, or whatever you want to call them in this country, to gain power and use them as pawns. And that's what this lecture is going to be about. It's not to cast any judgment or anything like that, because that's not what we do here at Spider Bite Venom Philosophy. It's just to help you see why when you are angry, there are those who are in power or those who seek power will use to take advantage of. So, anyways, to kind of jump right into this, we're just going to kind of go into the explanation of all this and why it's so. If you look at the first part here, anger leads to mental retardation and lunacy. It's been chronicled throughout history, whether it's in mythology or in some of the stories in the Bible, that anger is really the main problem with us, with people. When and we all know this to some extent, but we immediately forget this when when we become angry. In the heat of the moment, as they call it, we just forget that angry people throughout history have done stupid things, and a lot of and anybody with power has done not only stupid things but dangerous things, done things that have been lethal to either mankind or to societies in general. And there's all kinds of stories in the Bible that talk about this type stuff, and also there's been mythologies written about this and passed on throughout generations. So this is nothing new about anger. the English term mad comes from the fact that it's just another way of saying you're angry, and it's also another way of saying you're a lunatic. And we're going to talk about a little later about how people are using anger to get more power, but mad people, insane people, lunatic type people. The British were the first to institutionalize insane asylums for these people, and it's just one of those things where if we're not careful, if we don't learn to control our anger, which is really what Spider Bite Venom philosophy is all about. It's about to remind you what Spider Bite Venom philosophy is. It's a combination of Jedi / Tao / Stoic philosophy. And if you watch the movie Star Wars, you see that, and I'm not talking about the Disney nonsense, the corporate silliness from Disney. I'm talking about what George Lucas had outlined in his 6 episodes, was that anger, comes from selfishness. It kind of happens simultaneously, because the moment that we're angry, all we can do is think about ourselves, and we quickly forget about anyone around us. We just want to stop the pain, stop the suffering, because anger, it feels like you're suffering, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But it's at that moment you're not thinking clearly. You're basically retarded, and so not only do you do stupid things, not only can you hurt people, but you're left vulnerable to someone who knows better, to someone who's not retarded, to someone who's smarter than you, more cunning, maybe more seductive. It's really, it can really be a problem, and that's why there's so many stories about how people allowed their anger to bring their downfall. So, and because of that, there's been a lot of religions and different philosophies developed to deal with anger. Again, Spider Bite Venom philosophy. I just talked about the Jedi philosophy under Star Wars. You also have the Stoics. The Stoic philosophy. They constantly talked about controlling your reaction to things, which is just basically another way of saying controlling your anger. You can control how you react to situations and to certain things that happen in your life. What you can't control is maybe what is happening to you. You can control your reaction to it, but you can't control what is happening to you. So you just have to remember that, and that will help you calm down and help you realize there's no reason to be angry, because there's nothing you can do about it anyways. I mean, there may be some things you can do, But at the end of the day, you're never going to be able to control fully what's happening to you or what will happen to you and that sort of thing. The best you can do is just control your reaction to it. Learn to defend yourself. Learn to not be angry, and you'll avoid a lot of bad things happening to you. That's the Stoics, and then of course the Tao philosophy, which is this idea that whatever anything that goes up comes down, anything that comes around goes around. When you have light, there's got to be darkness. All of the opposites working in tandem with each other. That drives creation, that drives destruction, that drives anything. And which is why you don't have a judgment about why people do the things that they do. The only thing you can, the best way to look at it is, you don't want to do things that are going to harm others, because that would be definitely evil. So, but that's why religions and certain philosophies came about, was to deal with this problem with anger. These men of old, or however you want to call them, realized that mankind needed some kind of philosophy or some kind of religious / spiritual outlook on how to deal with anger, because it was that serious. It was that serious. It's always has been a matter of life and death. This problem of anger. And if you're going to learn anything from Spider Bite Venom philosophy, is that anger is your problem. It's not Joe Blow down the street. It's not some family member you might be upset with. It's not you're losing your job. It's none of those things. It's basically your reaction to these things, and if you're doing so out of anger, that's the problem. And that brings us to part C, which is widely understood that anger was suffering from selfishness. So these philosophers, these people who help spread certain religions, they were trying to spread the understanding and the wisdom that anger was actually you suffering from your own selfishness. So again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about how when you're angry, simultaneously you're selfish, because you're not thinking about anybody else except for yourself. And that emotion, that passion, that feeling, that strong feeling of pain and suffering, is a byproduct of you thinking only of yourself, thinking that these things only happen to you, thinking that only you can stop the pain, because it seems like no one else is going to stop it for you. It seems like everyone else is just as selfish as you are. And that suffering is you know, very painful, while at the same time motivational, so that you automatically start coming up with ideas on how to get rid of that pain. And most of the times, not all, but most of the times, that those ideas are dangerous, because they only center around getting what you want, which is your ego. It's you're not being compassionate at that point. Compassion means, instead of thinking of yourself at the moment that you feel angry, you forget that it's better to think of others and be compassionate. That's what compassion is. It's empathy. It's thinking of others, and thinking and reminding yourself that, hey, everybody has a hard time. Everybody struggles through life. Everybody, just because it may seem like somebody has it better than you doesn't mean that they don't have their own problems and things that they're dealing with, or just the fact that we all grow old and die. For women, it may seem like they have it all, but they're constantly worried about losing their youth and beauty. And for men, to women, it may seem like they have it all, but they may not realize that men suffer from feeling a lack of confidence, always feeling like they're not good enough, feeling like they're always competing against other men to be the best. And, when you suffer emotionally, your brain doesn't know the difference. It doesn't know the difference if you're suffering because you think people don't like me because I'm black, or whether or not I can't get this job because my brother is not in charge of that particular department, or the CEO of that particular company or something like that. So we just have to stop thinking of ourselves the moment that we become angry, because now we're suffering from our own selfishness, and we're going to continue to suffer until we remind ourselves that we're just being selfish. When we're babies, that's our original sin. It's just selfishness. When we're babies, there's never a time where we are more selfish, because we cry and scream and throw a tantrum so that we can get what we want from our parents. We do all kinds of stuff to get attention, to make it all about us. And when we're babies, it's cute, because we can't really hurt anybody when we act selfishly. But when we're an adult, and we become angry and throw tantrums and so forth, then now we're just retarded, because retardation means that we never grew up. We never, we still think that we're a baby who deserves all the attention because we're suffering for some reason, and we feel pain, and that's childlike, that's infant-like. And when blacks in particular behave that way. It's just another sign that angry blacks are just retarded, and again, I hate to say it like that, but it's true. And when you're retarded, at an age where you're supposed to be an adult, that means you need a guardian. That means you need someone to look after you. And if it's the wrong person, if it's someone who doesn't have good intentions, or if it's someone who has their own selfish ambitions in mind, then you're just a pawn. It's funny, my favorite game is chess. I used to be head of the chess club. And one of the things we learned playing chess, because I used to read books on chess. Chess was my life when I was a teenager. And, one of the things you learn is each piece represents a different motive for what they can do on the chessboard. So take, for instance, you have a rook. A rook can move only sideways or front to back, or a knight, he can only move 2 steps forward and 1 step to the side, right or left, or a pawn. An interesting thing about a pawn is the smallest piece on the board, and he can only move 1 step at a time, and his only objective, he can't really take out any other pieces unless they're neck 1 step away from him in a diagonal position. So he can't make a direct attack on let's say another pawn in front of him or another piece in front of him. He can only move 1 step in front of where he is, or he can attack if a piece is off to his side. And but the main, so that obviously, if you consider yourself if you, let's say as a human being, you were to just for hypothetical situation, you would consider yourself a pawn. You automatically, at least to me, that would make me angry. That's the only moves I could make. Where you got all these other pieces that can basically do anything. So now that means your motive, not because you're angry that you're limited. That means you're going to be motivated to just reach the other side of the board, because according to the rules, if you reach the other side of the board, now you can trade that piece for a bigger piece, a piece that has more power, that can make more moves than just a pawn. In other words, when a pawn reaches to the other side of the board, he doesn't trade up to be another pawn. Usually he wants to be a knight or a rook. But what he really wants is the power of the king. But you can't trade. The rules doesn't allow you to become the king. So, because the way the game is played is you ultimately are trying to take out the king. So in order to get the king, you have to become the most powerful piece you can trade up to be, which is the queen. So it's kind of ironic because here you are, you're a pawn, and you think you're going to be all powerful, which you could be, because the queen is the most powerful piece on the board. But ultimately, she's not the most important piece, which is the king, because when you get the king, the game is over. and that's why chess is probably the most powerful game that's ever been invented. And I think it was invented by the Persians, the Persian Empire. It's the most powerful, most interesting game that has ever been invented of all time. No electronic game could ever, no video game or whatever could ever beat it. Checkers is, it's a fun game, but it's nowhere close to chess. And that's because it's really a reflection of human selfishness and power. And the pawn is as insignificant piece the pawn is actually the most interesting when you think about it, because and the piece is so small, and it's got this little dome head on it, so the piece is basically moronic. Basically the piece is just retarded. It's just taking orders, and that makes that whoever, if you were to bring that piece to real life, the chess game itself is supposed to represent, a kingdom with an army and the army of pawns and the battle and that thing. So imagine if you're just a soldier. People always wonder, why would you back in the day fight for some idiot who declares himself king of so and so, and go fight all these battles for the glory of some dummy who calls himself king? It doesn't make any sense. But when you play chess, you realize that the reason why you go into battle, like if you ever seen these movies like Braveheart or Gladiator, where you got these huge epic armies of basically pawns that just go into battle, knowing that they're more than likely will get killed as soon as they reach the front line. And you got to ask yourself, why would these men do something that seems to us so stupid? And that's because their motivation is to get power. See, when back in those days, and even today, if you survive going into battle, you move up the ranks. You become a sergeant, or back in those days, you may become a knight. And or maybe a general or something like that. And that was the only way you can enter the nobility class back then, unless you were, you had divine birthright or whatever you want to call it, unless you were born into a family that was already in the nobility class, you had to be a pawn first. You had to go and fight some battles, risk your life for the king. And if the king was still alive, the best that you could possibly do is maybe be somewhere second best, maybe be a nobleman, like a knight or something, who is allowed to marry one of the king's daughters. So you're allowed to marry a princess or something like that. That's why chess was invented. That's why the term pawn was invented. That's what a pawn is. That's what we do today. We and I don't mean to get way off on tangent, but motivation. I talk about this before in my other articles and some videos I think I posted about why motivation is basically retarded, because when you're, motivation is an adrenaline boost that has originated from a strong emotion. And most of the times it's anger. And if it's not anger, then it's definitely selfishness, because if you want to be a pawn so that you think you can be a knight who can marry the princess at the end of the day, that's just, those desires are just selfish, and when you're selfishness, you're going to suffer. And if you think you have it all, or you don't think you have it all, at some level we're all selfish. And the key is to control that anger when it comes about, because then all of a sudden that selfishness will make us do stupid and retarded things like, self-destruct or hurt other people. So that brings us to weaponizing anger. When we talk about weaponizing something, anger, like any emotion, can be weaponized, and if you look at this part A here, it says motivate angry blacks like children with provocations, meaning that I think I just touched on this about children. When you're born, you're obviously we're obviously selfish, and then let's say, when we're old enough to do chores and clean our room and stuff like that, we're still selfish. We don't want to be told what to do. So when we are, that makes us angry, as children. So what do most parents do? to motivate the children to clean their room or do their chores or something like that. Um, they either offer them money, like an allowance, or maybe some privileges, like they can go outside after dinner or before dinner, um, stuff like that. I mean, that's how I remember it going growing up, and and that could be using, weaponizing anger for a good cause. Um, but what I'm talking about here is weaponizing anger, or motivating angry blacks to do stupid things by provocations. And they do it like children. What do I mean by that? Well, if you ever remember um, playing in a on a playground with a bully at a school or whatever, a lot of times, I remember there was a bully who used to kick my butt every day on the school bus. And one day I you know the my friends, or some other school kids, were telling me, you should just fight back. And this bully just kept provoking me, kept saying, no, you won't fight back, or something like that. You're a pussy, you're an idiot, or you're weak, you're not strong enough. And the more he kept saying that, the more that made me angry, and I did fight back. And after that, he stopped. He stopped messing with me. He stopped. He didn't try to fight me anymore. He's like, I guess he figured, he didn't want to deal with that anymore. So he left me alone. However, looking back on that now, I mean, yes, I was in the right to defend myself, but that kid, he just went looking for someone else, and then I had to deal with more bullies after that. There was always, which I think was a good thing. It taught me to defend myself, and my dad, he taught me to do so not out of anger, but just as a way of taking care of yourself. But every time I had to deal with one of these either neighborhood bullies or school bullies at school or whatever, there was always somebody provoking a fight. Oh, you can't do that. You can't kick his butt. I bet you can whoop your ass and all that type of stuff. And that's the type of provocation that would lead to me fighting. These bullies. And some of them were my friends. Some of them, like, we'd be friends one day, and then all of a sudden he say something to me that I didn't like or something, and next thing you know, we're in a fight because everyone around us is provoking the fight. And who ultimately was amused by this? It was the provocateurs. you know, and even I'm guilty. I was guilty of provoking fights. You know, I would be the one saying, "Oh, you can't whoop his ass. I bet you can, you know, beat you up and all that type of stuff." And just to get a fight started, and just to see two guys fight, and or two kids fight. You know, that's what we did. As you know, just as kids, you know, growing up, you learn early on how to manipulate each other and how to provoke each other and how to get each other into fights just for our own amusement. You know, I mean, you know, we're not doing it for some greater selfish reasons like I'm about to talk about now, but that's we you know, we learn early that this is easy to do. It's the most easiest thing to do. The most easiest thing to do. It's easier to get two people fighting than it is to get them to get along and respect one another and that sort of thing. It's a lot easier to just get them to just beat each other's brains out. That's a lot easier to do. And a lot of times, especially for blacks, they forget that they can be so easily manipulated and turned into pawns when the fake news media like CNN with Don Lemonhead and you know, Anderson Pooper and some of these other clowns constantly show you know, or constantly depict blacks as angry and victims of racism and police brutality and that sort of thing. You know, it's one thing to report incidents that happen, you know, tragic incidents that should never have happened in the first place. But to sensationalize incidents in order to provoke anger in someone is selfish. And so you have to ask yourself, why would you know, the news media, fake news media, whatever you want to call it, why would they do these things? Why would they provoke anger in black folks? And the simple answer to that is to turn a profit. You know, once you have a network that, you know, I think Ted Turner took him years to build back in the 80s. You know, and that network is pretty big and it's worldwide or international, whatever you want to call it. And you know, they have a budget they need to meet. They've already downsized as much as they could, and you know, and they realize it's just cheaper to just instead of reporting on real events and incidents that really affect people's lives, it's easier to just sensationalize everything, provoke anger in black people. And because when you do that, then they can get more attention, which leads them to get more sponsors and advertising, and that's where they make their money from. So we can complain all day about why, you know, fake news CNN with Don Lemonhead and Anderson Pooper and them provoke all this anger out of black folks, but it's just better to just not watch them. You know, that's why I'm trying to build this website and try to share this insight of what I've called Spider Bite Venom philosophy. Not to be political about anything, because I'm apolitical, but to show that when blacks allow themselves to be provoked through sensationalism and all this type of stuff, you have no one to blame but yourself. You're basically no different than someone who's retarded, and the very people that you're angry at, if you want to call them whites, white folks or whatever, half of them are going to laugh at you, and the other half are just going to feel sorry for you. Probably most are just going to feel sorry for you because they know, just like they feel sorry for any retarded person, because they know that you're not reasonable to talk to. All they can do is just either put you in an insane asylum, which is prison, arrest you, have you incarcerated or something like that, or let you go on for a while until you calm down. And if you don't calm down in time, then they're going to have to use force and they're going to have to arrest you, which will provoke more anger, and I'm going to get into a little bit about this later, but the laws set up in this country, in the United States, and the Constitution itself, founded by a handful of white males who just knew better. They realized that there was this problem with anger, and they designed they framed the Constitution in such a way that it dealt with it. Because if they would have designed the Constitution or the laws in this country to deal with the aftermath of anger, like they used to do it before, like they would believe in this hierarchy of kings and queens and monarchies and that type of stuff, and then maybe ally that with the church or something like that. If they still believed in that, it wouldn't have worked, because because human nature is anger, and that anger and selfishness inherently and automatically causes corruption in any hierarchy. So the Constitution, based off the Roman Republic and this sort of thing, was designed in a way to deal with anger. And they knew, or even if they didn't know, but subconsciously they probably knew that at some point, when people would get angry enough at the institution of slavery, that it still wasn't going to be enough, because that's the problem with selfishness. When you're selfish, there is no satisfaction. It's never when someone gives you what you want, you suddenly appreciate it, and then you calm down. Well, you do calm down, but but you're still not satisfied. You still want more. And that's because you're selfish. That's the human nature of it. It's never enough, because not only do you feel like you should get whatever it is that you're demanding, but you want to somehow believe you can undo what was done wrong to you in the past. And you know that that's not possible, because you can't undo history. History, it is what it is. It's already past. There's nothing you can do about it. But because you can't do anything about it, you suffer emotionally, because that, again, leaves you powerless. It still leaves you that feeling of powerlessness, and that makes you angry. So then you go from hating and being angry at your fellow man to being angry and hateful towards the truth, towards life in general. And anybody who represents that, especially if they're a good person trying to tell you something, trying to reason with you, you're just going to be angry at them as well, because your selfishness just blinds you. You can't see how that's a mistake. The only thing you can see, the only thing you can focus on is how much power you have in order to try to get things the way you want them to be, or undo all the wrongs that have been made against you in the past, or that you feel that may have been made against you in the past. And so smart people, or cunning people, people with dubious ideas, may take advantage of that anger. And how they may do this is by offering you money and power. Again, it goes back to that chess game. You think that if I'm a pawn long enough, I could survive all the way to the end. I can enter the nobility class. Excuse me. So, yeah, you're offered money and power, and this is what's always offered to angry blacks in exchange for their loyalty. So just to give you a little brief history of how that's happened in this country, just look at the Democratic Party. Here the Democratic Party basically founded the Ku Klux Klan. They opposed the Civil Rights Movement, or the Civil Rights Act, from being from passing Congress, and yet Lyndon Johnson, who was a businessman, realized as a Democrat that, hey, wait a minute, these black folks are angry. Maybe we can offer them a little bit of power, like the right to vote, that kind of thing, and then in exchange for that, they'll be voting. And this is his words. Niggas be voting Democrat for the next 200 years. So in other words, for exchange of their loyalty, he just basically gave him a little power, not much power. You just got the right to vote. Doesn't mean you're going to be president of the United States or whatever, or anything like that. It just means you have the right to vote. And an interesting thing about it is, again, the framers set up the Constitution knowing that the president can't be all powerful. He has to have a check and balance on himself. But angry blacks forget or don't even care that the Constitution was written this way so that anybody who thinks they're going to be all powerful in this country are going to realize the irony in that it's not that's not the case. But again, angry blacks will just not, either they don't understand that power is limited in this country, or they just don't care because maybe they feel, maybe because they're so angry at white folks that they think, well, because a white man wrote the Constitution, I don't need to understand it. Well, you need to understand it, because then you can understand why you're so retarded when you become angry and think that you having more power, like the right to vote, is never going to satisfy you. Nothing will satisfy you. Your own human nature will never be satisfied when you're angry. Even if you were king of the world, and this goes back to my spider body venom philosophy that I've said in other lectures, that death, and even the Bible says that the wages of your selfishness, your sin, is death. So death is the great equalizer of everything. So even if you're the most powerful man in the world, you're king of the world, that whole idea, you're still going to die, which is why, even when Adam and Eve felt like they had all the knowledge and power of the world, they realized, oh, now you weren't going to live forever. Now you're going to die, which is why our own selfishness is ultimately checked at that point. And when we realize that, we suffer if we're angry. If we're angry at the world, we're going to be suffering, because at the end of the day, no matter how much power we're given, we can't save ourselves from death. We all are going to die at some point, whether we, at the hands of someone else or just by old age and sickness and that sort of thing. But it's so easy for angry blacks to be manipulated this way as pawns, because all Lyndon Johnson had to do, President Lyndon LBJ, all he had to do was just throw a cookie to the angry blacks, which was, signing into law the Civil Rights Act. And that's why blacks will forever be Democrats, especially angry blacks. And it's just another sign that they're retarded, because because the Democratic Party doesn't really give a damn about you. I'm not saying that politically. I'm just saying that as it just should be obvious, because the next thing that they offered after they signed the Civil Rights Act was this big welfare program, called the Great Society or whatever. And, once you understand, and I talk about this over and over again in my Spider Bite Venom philosophy, once you understand attachment, that comes from the Jedi philosophy, where, you're prohibited. The Jedi were prohibited from being attached, from attachment. So they weren't really supposed to marry. They really weren't supposed to, get involved in all kinds of stuff and politics or anything like that. They were not to be attached to anything, because once you're attached to something, whether it's a feeling or your own family or your own your business or to a certain amount of money or whatever, once you're attached, once you take the bait, see, now you're stuck. Now you're going to feel obligated. Now you're going to remain loyal to whoever it was that gave you what you wanted. You're gonna feel loyal. You're gonna feel obligated to be loyal to that person. So by signing into law, or I don't know how they did it, but they basically passed some kind of welfare program for blacks, and blacks took it. They felt like that was their reparations, or so to speak, or felt like it was justice. It was due to them, because of their anger, and not realizing that it was just selfishness. Because now the Democratic Party can hold that whole welfare over the heads of angry blacks for generations to come. That was the point. It was never meant to be enough money to support you and your family. It was never a program to lift you out of poverty or anything like that. It was just there to keep you loyal to the Democratic Party. That's it. And it works. It's working today. It's always worked. It's because, LBJ understood that. And you can question his sincerity of the program or anything. I would, but that's beside the point. The fact is that it works. You can manipulate and treat angry blacks like pawns by just offering them money and power. That's all you have to do. It goes back to what I was saying earlier about how easy it was to provoke a fight on the playground as a child, as a teenager. It's the easiest thing. It's so easy because you're offering someone else. Well, first you're provoking someone else, their anger. And when you provoke anger in someone else, then you promote your solution, which is, go ahead and fight this guy and hurt this guy and take what you got coming to you, or whether it's being manipulated and seduced into some welfare program. It's the same principle. And only someone who's angry and retarded will fall for it. Or childlike. Maybe a teenager doesn't know any better. So, and that's why I put here in part C, disingenuous power sharing makes blacks more angry. So what happened after the civil rights movement? Angry blacks, they got what they wanted. They even created the Congressional Black Caucus. So that gave them some more power. That actually gave them some political power in Congress. In the House of Representatives, not in the Senate. No such thing in the Senate. See, the Senate. Remember, this the real power is in the Senate. The Senate's the republic. The House of Representatives is just. I mean, they have power, but it's so diffused amongst an endless plethora of idiots and retarded she-boons and dummies who are angry and squabbling all the time and talk a lot of nonsense and just make up stuff and don't care about anybody else except for trying to, they're the pawns. The House of Representatives and the framers knew this. They knew that the more selfish you were, the more selfish you were, the more likely you would never go beyond either being some local politician or maybe elected in the House of Representatives. To become a senator or the president of the United States, something like that, requires that you calm down. You calm down a lot, and you can't be retarded, and just out of control if you're going to be a senator. I mean, it's getting to a point now where even that's starting to break, where you get a lot of dummies in the Senate, but still, because of the Electoral College and the way it's set up, and the way the senators have to be elected, because even in their own states, state senators they go by this Electoral College model. It's genius. It puts like chains. It bounds these dummies to the floor, so that their anger just doesn't get out of control, and their passions and their ambitions and their greed and selfishness for power is just it's kept in check. And that's why these angry black movements, like you see today, like the Black Lives Matter nonsense, they're being used by white liberals and others who are so angry at the truth of the way the Constitution is written, because it restricts the power that they feel like they can use the angry blacks to cause a revolution. If you get a revolution going, because even the framers knew that they made it nearly impossible to amend the Constitution, change the Constitution, try to rewrite the Constitution. Like, it's almost impossible to do. So the only way you can get away with something like that is through force, is literally through another revolution. And start all over. And so a lot of white liberals and a lot of others who, other countries who just, especially like the British, they don't like the idea that they have to share power, and you'd be surprised to learn how they've sponsored movements and groups to start a revolution and sabotage governments and even the United States. And And that's because of the anger. The anger is just prevalent throughout all levels, and affects blacks mostly because, most of them are ignorant of this fact. They don't understand. They're too angry to understand, what the root cause of their suffering is. And it's their anger. So that means that the ones, again, who they think they are their allies, are really just disingenuous, because it's the rule of two. Go back to the Jedi philosophy, where the Sith, they have to live by this rule of two, sharing power. They ultimately want power just for themselves, but they realize that they ultimately realize they have to share that power, because they can't they can't do it alone. They need someone else who is loyal to them, not trust them. There's a difference between loyalty and trust. You can, and this is where disingenuous is all about. You can be loyal to your family members, to your job, to a number of things, but it doesn't necessarily mean you trust them. It doesn't necessarily mean you think that maybe you think, well, there's no way I could be fired or be laid off or something like that. Like you just you can be loyal, but then that does not necessarily mean you can trust that person. So that power sharing, the fact that white liberals in the Democratic Party are sharing their power with angry blacks, it's just all disingenuous. The angry blacks still hate white folks, and the white liberals know that. There's nothing they can do to satisfy them. Nothing. Lyndon B. Johnson gave them everything they wanted, supposedly. Gave them everything they wanted. But because of that anger, they can never be satisfied. I think there's a song called that, if I remember, Never Satisfied or something, or a slogan or something like that. But you can't satisfy angry people. You just can't. And that's why white folks can never trust blacks, especially angry blacks. Many of them would like to, but let's say you had an angry pit bull as a pet in your house, and that's a powerful dog who can protect you from intruders and home invaders and that sort of thing. But do you fully trust that dog? That dog has got some psychological problems, because at any moment that dog can flip out. I think the pit bull, it's been outlawed in so many states. I think the pit bull is like borderline a wild animal. Like it cannot totally be domesticated. Most dogs can be domesticated, but you can't domesticate fully, a pit bull or a wolf, like there are people who have wolves as pets, but they don't trust them all the way. They have to keep them in cages, because they know, at any point, a wolf, excuse me, a wolf, if it's hungry enough, will eat its own puppies. They'll eat each other. Wolves are cannibals, not by nature, but just maybe just out of necessity, like out of starvation. even human beings to some extent are that way. Maybe not cannibals, but they would, except in some extreme cases, but they'll do things to each other, especially angry blacks. They'll do things to each other because their anger doesn't allow them to control themselves. They'll flip out, just do stupid shit. And white liberals who share power with them in the Democratic Party, they know this. They know that. So what do? With what you're seeing today, with this George Floyd incident, they're doing everything they can to appease the blacks. It's like what you would do if you didn't know any better with a pit bull dog or a mean dog. You try to be nice to the dog as much as you can. You try to baby the dog. You try to give the dog whatever it wants. Oh, you're hungry, here. You try to baby talk to him or whatever. Whatever you think you need to do to calm that dog down, you do. But guess what? That animal is still retarded compared to a human being, and it will bite back at some point, or it will flip out for no reason. Or maybe there is a reason. Maybe you provoke the dog or touch the dog in a way he didn't like, and that sets the dog off, and it snaps back at you or tries to bite you or something like that. That's very possible, because that animal, it has. It's almost impossible to get rid of all the anger that's been bred into that animal. That animal is emotionally damaged. It's been bred like that. It's been bred to feel angry all the time for whatever reason. Doesn't matter. And unfortunately, angry blacks are kind of been raised up throughout generations the same way, and the way they do it is through the media and the education, the university, the colleges, even the high schools, the history classes. It's all about all the wrongs has been done to blacks, so that blacks are constantly grieving over these past injustices, and that keeps them angry. And if they can scapegoat white folks, then oh wow, now that's easy. Now you can, let's say you're in the Democratic Party or a white liberal or whatever, you can easily scapegoat a Republican who's white, even though Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, and he wrote the Emancipation Proclamation to free the slaves. So it just doesn't matter when you're angry. When you're an angry black, you're just never satisfied. It just takes one incident like this George Floyd ordeal, and you'll just, if you're angry black, you'll just lose your mind. You just go out of control and just start tearing up shit. So that disingenuous and power sharing in the Democratic Party is evident, and not just the Democratic Party, just as a country as a whole, because we all have to live together in this country. So, and the framers of the Constitution, they knew this. They knew that that's why they wrote the Constitution this way. You're seeing the breaking, how much stress the Constitution can take, because it's like a leash on a mean dog. A pit bull, if that leash is not strong enough, it may break that leash. It may get away regardless if it's tied up. And when it does, watch out. somebody's gonna somebody's gonna feel the pain when a dog bites. So so that brings us to part 3 here. Angry blacks and Muslims are pawns. Again, this is just a repetition of what I've been saying. Angry blacks and Muslims always used to cause ethnic wars. If you look at the British, it's interesting how the British Empire is interesting because they've learned how to share their empire. They don't call it empire, but they learn how to share the world dominance with the Americans. So that's why it's called the Anglo-American Empire. But when it was just the British, the way they became so powerful was just using the cheap and easy way out. Like, again, going back to what I was saying earlier on what happened as a child on the playground. They just used provocation, especially the Muslims. The Muslims were especially angry all the time. Here you had at the fall of the Roman Empire, you had the Muslims on one side and Christendom on the other side, basically with the Catholic Church and the Pope and all that. And both sides were angry, but the Muslims, being that they were the ones who were unable to get all what they wanted, just remained angry. And the British knew that. And so what the British would do is just take advantage of that, use the Muslims whenever they could as pawns to build their empire, to destroy their enemies, destroy each other, and then they would just come and scoop up the spoils. So that's why the British Empire was always known for betraying their own allies. It didn't matter what territory they were trying to conquer or what they were trying to do. They would just seduce a small group of their people with money and power, little money, offer some money, offer some power. And, in the Muslim tradition or Muslim religion or whatever, there's all kinds of allowances or justifications for anger. So you're allowed to kill out of anger, out of vengeance. It's not like Christendom where, in the Old Testament, that a lot of that was, the Jews were allowed to justify and get revenge and that sort of thing. But when Christianity came about, when Jesus Christ came about, he said, well, that's not, we don't want to act like that anymore. We want to turn the other cheek. Then all of a sudden it was the idea that, anger is not a good thing. Anger's not, there's no justification for anger. I mean, even if you are justified, there's no justification for acting on that anger, acting out in vengeance. It's because all it does is just breed more suffering. But the Muslims, because they never had that kind of reformation, they're like the Jews, and it's not a judgment on which one is better. It's just the fact that when you have when you feel justified by your own religion to act out of anger, then then you can be easily manipulated by disingenuous people. And angry blacks and Muslims have always been used in that way to cause wars. The British knew that. The British were very cunning, very smart in the way they did that. They would just go in and use the Taliban, Muslims, for instance. Jimmy Carter, I remember when I was a kid, he was president, and I remember watching the news, and he had this. I forget if he was a defense secretary or whatever. I forget who Brzezinski or whatever, but his job was to just go in and offer money and power to the Taliban to fight the Cold War. Fight the Russians in Afghanistan, get them out of there. Of course they would be angry. The Russians were led into Afghanistan because they were trying to fight a Cold War against the United States. And so that meant they had to occupy parts of Afghanistan. And so the British, along with the Americans, under Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter, used Brzezinski to go over there and cut deals with the Taliban. Say, hey, you want to get back at these clowns? Help us out too, and we'll give you some money, we'll give you some weapons. And we know that, the Muslim religion allows you to act on anger and vengeance and that sort of thing. And, we'll help you out. Same thing with the Iran-Iraq war. The British was the chief architect of carving up the Middle East after World War I. And then, later World War II. I mean, it's just they did it on purpose because they knew that there would be enough anger on each side of these political borders that they carved up to provoke war. And all they had to do was just say, hey, you want to get back to get back at your enemies, and hey, we'll give you some weapons to go do it. Saddam Hussein, he got all this. Donald Rumsfeld under, I believe it was the Reagan administration. He was the one that went over there and sold him all that stuff. Because the Iraqis were angry at the Iranians. And and Rumsfeld, I don't know if it was Rumsfeld, but the Americans were also supplying, and the British were also supplying the Iranians with weapons to fight the Iraqis. And what was the purpose in all that? Well, the purpose was to for one, keep them in debt, because when you're in war, you need to borrow money, and two, to control them and manipulate them. They wanted to keep a lid on how much oil came out in the Middle East. So if you got instability there, you can't expand your oil production too much, because if you did that, then your prices will go down and so low that it would be below cost of production. Wouldn't make any money. It wouldn't be a viable commodity. So who knows? I mean, there's a lot of reasons. A lot of different interests. I mean, anybody who wants power, once they find out that it's this easy to manipulate angry blacks and Muslims to get more of what you want, which is more power, you come up with any reasons to do these things. I mean, it's almost as easy as just taking a dump. I mean, they don't care about these people. They never have. What they care about is power. And if I know that angry blacks and Muslims are going to give me more power, give me loyalty, or help me fight some battles or something to that effect, then why not? The way I see it, they're retarded anyways. They don't know any better. So, which brings me to my last point, which is why angry blacks used as pawns during civil rights movements and beyond. So going back to this country here, they know that it's just never enough. The civil rights movement was not enough to pacify angry blacks, because they know that, at the same time, those welfare programs that everybody's invested in, I mean, think about it. If you're a white liberal and you don't want blacks moving into your neighborhoods, or at least the retarded angry blacks, well, what do? Well, you attract them to their own neighborhoods with welfare. You don't have to, and tell them that, keep them angry. Tell them that you don't have to work, you don't have to do anything. As a matter of fact, if you're angry enough, we'll even give you some reparations. We'll make sure though that money stays in the black ghettos and the hood and all that. Think about that for a second. But what they're saying, what they're really saying is, we'll do whatever it takes. We'll go beyond the civil rights movement if we have to keep angry blacks in, deteriorating inner cities, and riddled with gang violence and shooting each other and drugs and that type of thing, and prostitution. If that's what we have to do, that's fine. We'll live out in our suburbs and these lily white neighborhoods, and you can grit and gnash your teeth all you want, because you were angry and retarded to begin with. So what's the indication that you're going to be any different after you get what you want? We know that you're not going to be satisfied, and we'll take advantage of that dissatisfaction every time we need to, because we're selfish too. I mean, I'm just telling you what the subconscious thinking of a white liberal, or whatever you want to call it, is thinking. Not even a white liberal, somebody like myself. I'm black. I don't want angry black folks in my neighborhood. I consider myself normal. I consider myself someone who has a normal IQ. I might not be the smartest guy in the world, but I just consider myself someone who's got some common sense, some common decency, who knows, who's not angry. So why would I want to bring, it's funny how now the whole you know, cry is that, you know, black folks are constantly scared of, you know, driving while black or walking on the street while being black or that sort of thing. No, 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 no. As a black man, I'm more scared of another black man because I have no idea what he's up to. You know, I'm just as scared of a black man walking down the street as if I see an angry dog. If I see an angry dog, it's not that's not on its leash. I compare that to an angry black man who's not, you know, who needs a leash, who needs some home training, who needs a guardian, who needs someone to look after him. Because at any moment he might flip out of control and try to rob me, steal something from me, and I'm black. And you know, and I'm justified in my concern. I'm not angry at him. I just, out of self-defense, you know, you know, I feel more comfortable with white liberals in the Democratic Party handling angry blacks in this way, because there is no other way. There is no other way. Angry blacks and Muslims they're just not rational people. They're out of control. And you know, I hate to say that, but it's just the truth. There's no other way to describe it. And so you need someone who's smarter than they are, who knows a little bit of how this stuff works. And you know, you need something like the U.S. Constitution who protects, you know, us from these type of people, from these sort of people, and let it work itself out. You know, the future for angry blacks is going to be no different than where they're at right now, because you can never satisfy them. This is, you know, like I said, I've seen the Rodney King riots. It was the exact same thing as this George Floyd thing. It's the exact same thing. The outrage, the anger, the fake news, you know, sensationalizing everything. It was the same thing. And you know, the best thing you can do is just calm down, not be angry yourself, and defend yourself by moving out of those neighborhoods, getting away from, you know, the inner cities and that type of stuff. You know, I love how Trump is trying to, you know, pour money into these inner city neighborhoods, you know, through these enterprise zones and that sort of thing. Because maybe he won't admit it, but I'm sure, you know, we all know that none of that's going to work because first of all, angry blacks are never going to appreciate it. And the ones who do are going to try to do something with the money, but they'll just get destroyed by their own blacks, by their own black people. But it's enough to at least keep them together, because anyone who's smart enough, who's got two brain cells that rub against each other, would just move out, do whatever they got to do. You know, if you got to play basketball and shoot hoops and all that, do it. You got to, you know, become a rapper, do it. I can tell you from experience, you don't have to do it that way. You can just, you know, get a regular 9-to-5 job and just move out of the hood. But But anyone who's smart enough, who's not this retarded, should just move out. Forget the enterprise zones and all the welfare programs and all the stuff that the white liberals are offering you, and the little bit of power that they give you to make you think that you that you have it your way, and that sort of thing. It's better for you to think that way so you can leave us alone. Leave us the hell alone. We don't want you coming over here tearing up stuff. And I'm black. So as ridiculous as this sounds, but the LBJ and the Democratic Party is doing a fine job of protecting the rest of the country from angry blacks. In an indirect way, that's what they're doing. And the Constitution, unless there's a revolution, protects us from any of these dummies from getting enough power to change anything of any significance. So we don't have to worry about that, Just let these blacks fight it out amongst themselves, kill each other, and blow themselves up and all that crazy crap like the Muslims do over in the Middle East. And just stay out of it. Because you can't reason with them. You get involved. It's one thing to take a chance or risk for something that's actually, worth your while. But when you're dealing with a group of angry blacks or Muslims who you can't even reason with, who you can't, that's dangerous. That's not a risk worth taking. These people could care less about your arguments, or you're trying to reason with them, you're trying to explain things to them in a certain way to help them out. They don't give a damn about that. They're angry. These people are these are retarded she-boons and idiots and dummies who are beyond any help that you can possibly give them. The best thing that you can do is just offer them some cookies, like a dog, here, give them a little biscuit, or a little doggy bone, and let them play with that for a while. And just keep that leash on them. Keep that leash, because if that dog bites or gets out of control, then hey, you got to call in the police. And this is all not to say that blacks have not been at the end, have not had injustices set against them. I mean, slavery obviously was the biggest injustice in human history and all that. But there's nothing we can do about it. It's all in the past. There's no institutionalized slavery at this current time in the United States. So anybody who tells you different just wants to manipulate you, treat you like a pawn, and use you like a pawn because they think you're retarded, and you are. So anyways, that should wrap it up for this lecture here of Black Power and why angry blacks are pawns. And, I hope I didn't really offend anybody. I mean, I could care less, to be honest. whether YouTube strikes this video down. I doubt it, because I mean, I don't have that many subscribers yet. I barely get 1 or 2 views on each of these videos anyways, but hopefully things will change to where free thought and different philosophical ideas are available again to people. I just want to say that hope you maybe learn something from this. Maybe at least get a better understanding of why things are the way they are, and not be afraid of the future or what's going to happen, because the only way evil is gotten rid of is that it takes itself out. You don't have to do anything. We have the Constitution of the United States. We have these laws on there that protect us from dummies, which is us, which is retarded idiots and dummies. And we don't have to worry about that. At the end of the day, the dummies, I mean, they're already exposing themselves to be completely and totally retarded with the ideas and the demands that they're making. It's like defund the police and stuff like that. It's just ridiculous. It's just cartoon. You got this autonomous zone in Seattle, Washington, called Chaz. So basically a breakaway republic, and it's retarded. It's dumb. It's dumb shit. It's this type of shit you see in the hood, where niggas is just coming together talking shit, like there's nothing else for them to do. They're not working. They're just waiting for their next welfare check, or bumming a couple dollars to go buy cigarettes or something. That's all they're doing. But it's just hilarious to see them make all these demands that don't mean anything. Which is why we don't have to be afraid of it, because at the end of the day, there's law and order. There's laws on the books that will rectify this kind of stuff. And a lot of this doesn't even have to be enforced right away, because these people are so disorganized. Because when you're retarded, you don't know anything. So you're going to make demands, and you're going to try to do something in such a disorderly way that you're just going to cancel your own ideas out. None of this will ever come about, because you don't even know where your electricity and your water comes from. So how are you going to, survive as a quote unquote autonomous zone or some breakaway republic nonsense? It's ridiculous. Or hashtag defund the police. These, or you see like these demands to let idiots like, Kaepernick back in the NFL and stuff like that. Who gives a fuck? I hate to be cursing like this, but it's like this is just dummies who are just retarded, and what they're demanding doesn't mean anything, because even if you were to give them all that, still wouldn't be satisfied. They'd still be angry. Because what do they want? What do they really want? I just wrap up with this. Let's just ask that question for a second. What do they really want? Martin Luther King, he was smart, because all he asked for was just equality. And he did so in a nonviolent manner. What these angry she-boons and baboonies and dummies want today is not equality. They already have that. Everybody's already treated equally under the law post Civil Rights Act signed into law. So what do they really want? They want power. That's why they call it black power. They don't want And again, they don't want just any kind of power. They want to be all powerful. They want to be more. What does that mean? They want to be more powerful than the U.S. Constitution itself. Because the U.S. Constitution is a document that limits political power. That's what it is. The Bill of Rights, the U.S. Constitution, it limits your power, no matter what branch of government you serve in. So what these idiots want, what these lunatics want, is to overthrow that. And they'll, of course, never get that. So anyways, we don't have to worry about that. Just, laugh at them. I mean, it's tragic in the end, but, we have to lighten ourselves up with some humor when we see this kind of stuff to some extent. So I hope this has been informative to you, and hope you got something out of it. And stay tuned for the next Spider Bite Venom philosophical lecture, and stay safe.